Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the second episode of Muslims in the Game podcast. I know it's been a while since the first one, but believe me, this will be a pod worth waiting for. So I'm really honoured and pleasured to be sat here with someone who's worked in elite sport for over 20 years. He's worked across multiple top level Premier League football clubs, although Tottenham might be debatable. He's a Premier League title winning doctor. Ladies and gentlemen, none other than Dr Zaf. Dr Zaf, pleasure to have you here today.
Jazakallah, thanks for the invite.
No problem at all. So you're up in Manchester or in surroundings visiting family, and I've been hounding you on LinkedIn to come and have a chat with me. So I really appreciate you giving me your time.
No problem at all.
So let's just get it out of the bag. You've just finished your position at Arsenal. What's next for Dr. Zaf? Are you going to take some time out, or are you looking forward to spending some time with your family? You spoke to me earlier on about having some time for the wife and kids. Is that the focus now?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I've been working constantly for the last 21 years in football, last 19 consecutive seasons in the Premier League. And last season, although it culminated in that fantastic achievement of the Premier League, it was very tough. And what I mean by that, it was so intense with over 60 games every 3 days. The pressure and intensity of every single game was pretty full on. And unfortunately, my family probably bear the brunt of that, in the sense that they didn't get anywhere near the best version of myself. And working in football is difficult enough as it is, especially if you're trying to have a family life. So I've decided that I just want to take a little bit of a break.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few other options which I can't share just yet.
Okay.
And just to share some time with the family as well. I mean, the last couple of weeks is the longest I've had in 21 years with the family. So we managed to go away for a short break, and inshallah, once the school holidays finishes, once they start, then we'll go away together as well. But I've got a few options, and I've just got to decide what's going to be right for me and the family.
So thinking about the number of games that Arsenal played last season, you mentioned it was...
it was over 60, I think it was like 63
yeah,
62.
And I can imagine your days would have started really early and finished late. I'm not just saying it, but you look fresh. Is that because of the time you've had since leaving Arsenal, or is it because you just look after yourself really well?
I think you have to look after yourself, because in the industry that I'm in, where it's performance environment, you've got to make sure that, and you're making lots of decisions very, very quick, very intense. You've got to make sure that you try and look after yourself. At the end of the day, you can't be in a performance environment and be informing the players to be looking a certain way, eating the right kind of foods, making sure that they get the right recovery if you're not doing some of those practices yourself. And also, I think it's important to look after yourself, because going back to the high level performance environment I'm working in, you've got to be making difficult decisions very, very quickly. And so if you're not the best version of yourself, then that's where errors can come in.
So just an example on that. So give us an example. So could it be a player's suffered an injury and they need to take something or have a particular type of surgery quite quickly, and you have to make a very quick decision?
It can be something as simple like, we had games almost every 3 days. And so a player may pick up a knock in training, and decisions need to be made very, very quickly as to whether that player potentially could be available for the next game, which may be the next day, or it may be in a couple of days. And so the manager needs to plan as to what players he's got available. But we've also got to get the information as quickly as possible, whether that be further investigations, put that all together, and then with the rest of the medical team and the performance team, sports science team, and the coaching staff, see what is going to be best for the player if we are going to be able to turn them round. So if they've got training the next day, then we've got to decide and have discussions which may go on into the evening as to what the plan is going to be for the players and the rest of the players for the following day. So that's why it's you don't know what's going to happen. Things change very, very quickly, and so you have to be ready to be able to adapt. You have to be ready to be on the move. So for example, if a player suddenly comes up with an issue, and it may even be the case where they've left the training ground and suddenly you find out that something has happened or they don't feel quite right, then you've got to act quickly on that, because it can't really wait till the next day. So it's pretty full on. You don't switch off, because there's never a moment where you're not thinking either about the next game or the game after that as well. And also there's a training session, so constantly you're thinking about the players, and because the games are coming so quickly, you're constantly switched on.
So that's interesting, because from a fan's perspective, when we see a player's got injured, we're quite impatient. We want to know like really quickly what the prognosis is, how long is he going to be out for. But it's not that simple, is it?
No, of course, because there's many factors that come into play. Once a player has got an injury, the first thing that the player will ask, the manager will ask, is when can they be back training? How long is this going to take? And at the end of the day, you know, it's a performance environment. Ideally, you would like to take as long as it requires,
but I guess
you don't have that luxury.
The managers wants their best players.
Of course,
fit
and so does
healthy.
the player.
Yeah.
And so does the player. The player wants to be back as quickly as possible. So what you have to do is collectively, is everything's a risk assessment. So players are rarely 100%. So what you have to do is look at what issue a player may have. If it's blatantly an injury where they're not going to be able to perform, so it's all about performance. If they're not going to be able to perform and do anything which is going to be of any use to himself, the manager and the team, then they're going to be out. So if they get something which either requires surgery or it's an injury which needs a period of rehabilitation, then that's usually quite straightforward. It's those that may have had a little knock or a small strain, and then you've got to make a decision as, look, there's a risk they go out, they could actually make this worse. And the second thing is, can they perform with this? Is the issue that they've got, are we able to manage this in such a way that they are going to be able to perform to the level that is required for the manager? So, and that can vary from player to player. You don't just treat what you see on the scan, you have to tie that in. How is this actually affecting the players? So this, what may be a similar injury affects players in different ways.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was some players that I've worked with who I know had injuries, but they were able to just play through it. And, you know, there were players who never missed a single game, even though you know that they're carrying issues, but they were able to adapt. Whereas you'd have other players, if they had even the smallest issue, they would find it difficult to perform to the level that they required.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So how does Dr. Zaf stay fit and focused then? You said, you know, if you're working at elite level and people look at you as an example, how do you keep yourself fit and healthy? And
it's hard, it's discipline. I used to play a lot of football. I stopped about 4 years ago. I was always crazy about football, even at university. We'd play 2-3 games, sometimes even during a day. We would set up different societies. We set up the Pakistani Society, the Islamic Society, the South Asian Society, just so we could block book the hall, the sports hall. So we would have block book. So you could block book the hall, the five-a-side hall, if you were attached to a society. So we created these societies, these different named societies, just so we could block book. And we would play sometimes 2-3 games just in one day.
Yeah.
We'd play a game in the morning before uni started, go into uni, then there'd be a game midday, we'd come back home and then somebody give us a shout and say, we've got another game on. So it wouldn't be unheard of us playing 3 games in a day. We were nuts about
when you're younger, you've got that fitness avenue that you can keep going. So you mentioned about football being a passion of yours. So you sent me a biography, which was really interesting. I had to read through it. So you were born in Pakistan.
That's right.
And you moved to England when you were 3 months old, I think?
2 months old. Yeah.
And your family settled in Rochdale.
That's right.
So with Nathan, the first guest I had, it was really interesting to go back and just go through like his journey and just touch on things that happened in his life. Because I think, it'd be good to know the man behind Dr. Zaf. And I think it'd be interesting to know about your upbringing. So you're in Rochdale, you're a young kid, you've come from Pakistan. What was it like growing up in Rochdale?
It was tough, but fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my school years were some of the best years of my life. Even just driving up here today from London, I was just speaking with one of my old school friends, and some of the antics that we did, you know, it was relatively harmless, but just some of the silly pranks that we did. I mean, I hope my son's not listening to this, because, you know, there's no way I would allow him to do those sort of pranks. But I just had the best time ever.
Yeah.
Just silly little things, even like home economics. I could quite easily spend 2 hours. You're meant to be making something in home economics, like expecting you make some extravagant dish, and I would just spend 2 hours with icing, sugar, water and green colouring, and just rolling that for 2 hours. And then when the teacher come around and say, what have you done for 2 hours? And I said, I've made mithai. And that was it. And they would just look at you and they're like, okay, they don't know whether to tell me off or not. And I'm just literally, it was just like putty. I've just been rolling that. So just some of the things that we used to get away with. I know that my son could no way get away with, but it was all harmless fun. So school was really an escape. Home was tough. My dad was a bus driver.
Okay.
Mum, although she got a small fabric shop later, she was primarily a housewife. I was one of 6 children, and my dad's aim was just that he just wanted me to have an education. So it was the usual thing of being a Pakistani parent. He wanted me either to be a doctor, dentist, chartered accountant or lawyer.
Yeah, that's what my grandma used to say to us kids, like be a doctor.
That's it. And so it was just.
So you took it literally.
Well, it was, and to be honest, initially I was going to go. I quite liked the thought of engineering. From a young age, my dad would, anything that was broken around the house, he would get me to fix it. Even from the age of 6 years old, it was unreal. Even if there was anything electronic that had broken, like the TV, when the valve would go, the big old TVs, he'd get me to open it up. This was when I was like 10 years old.
So, you know, just on that, and I've never really thought about this until you just said it, but medicine, doctor, engineering, like I can see a crossover.
Sure.
Because with being a doctor, you're fixing things that have gone wrong, and that's what engineers can do as well.
Of course.
You mentioned about a valve. I mean, our bodies are made up of very different components that do different things, so maybe that also kind of led to
it is. And I think I was always from a young age, I just like enjoying fixing things, and then seeing the outcome at the end of it. And my dad always, so I never had school holidays. My dad would loan me out. When I say loan me out, he would offer me to the people in the street to clean their windows and paint their windows.
Were you paid?
No.
Oh, okay.
My dad would just that's
keep
just
you busy.
He would just keep me busy, because in his mind is that'll keep me out of trouble. So it was quite difficult for me, because I'd be at the top of the ladders and there's nobody holding the ladder at the bottom. When I look back at it, I don't think from a health and safety it was necessarily the right thing to do. But I'd be there cleaning windows, and I'd see all the other kids playing in the fields, and I could just see them at the top, and I'd be crying to myself, going, that's what I want to do. But look, alhamdulillah, I think what it showed me was work ethic, discipline, and it probably did keep me out of trouble.
And I think there's something I can link that to in a little bit when we go further into your story, which is quite interesting. So you suffered an ACL injury. How old were you when that happened? Is it 10?
No. Oh. So that was much later on.
Oh, okay.
So that was much later on. So the reason I wanted to actually go into medicine was, unfortunately, I had a sister who had brain cancer.
Okay.
So I was 10 at the time when she first, and I think she was 3 years old or 4 years old. And I remember back, I think it was my dad who spotted it. When she'd walk, she would walk off balance. And so I think they'd done then some further scans, and that's how they then picked up that she had a brain tumor. And so over the next 6 years, the care that she received, I think that's what really drove me to wanting to be a doctor, because, as I say, almost every school holiday then at the same time, if I wasn't cleaning windows, I'd be in the hospital, because my dad would be working on the buses, and then I would be expected to go to the hospital and be with my sister.
At 10?
Yeah. just to accompany her during the day.
Yeah. And was she your youngest sibling at the time?
Yes, she was.
So that must have been really difficult, even at 10, to process and to... Yeah, it must have been quite hard.
It was, because I was the oldest as well. And at the same time, when my parents were out, either at the hospital or my dad was at work, I was expected to look after the younger ones. But I just... I didn't know any different.
Mm.
So although I could see the kids playing at the end of the street, as far as I was concerned, this was the path that I was meant to tread. And so, I helped bring up my siblings when my parents weren't there. And then similarly, when my sister was in hospital, my parents couldn't be there, then I would be expected to be with her and stay with her in the hospital. Did
you have a lot of family in Rochdale, or was it just your immediate parents?
No, there was a bit of family.
Okay.
So my dad's, so I had quite a few uncles and aunties, but at the end of the day, they have their own lives to lead. And so, especially when you got something which went on for, I think, nearly 6 years, there's only so much that other people can do.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah. So ultimately, we had to deal with everything ourselves.
So you said so I take it your sister did pass away.
She did, sadly.
Sorry.
She passed away. She actually passed away on my 15th birthday, which is not something that I forget.
Wow. So every birthday is a reminder of your life.
I do find it difficult because people somehow get reminders on their phones that it's my birthday, and so they'll wish me happy birthday. I just don't know how to react, even though I try and tell people, look, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I don't celebrate my birthday for obvious reasons. And most people are obviously apologetic and say, look, we don't know and stuff, and it's not their fault. But it's just something, as I say, I just find it difficult, because obviously I remember what happened on that particular day as well, when she passed away and stuff. And so even though it's over 30 years ago, I can still remember it like it was yesterday.
So you
nearly 40 years ago.
So how old were you and how old was she when?
She was nearly 10 and I was 15.
So going from 15 up to becoming an adult, it must have been really tough, because we take for granted these things about birthdays. You know, it's just a given. It's my birthday, I'm going to celebrate it, or some people don't anyway. But for you at 15, at a young age, to not have that choice, and obviously it's understandable, it's quite tough.
It was, but I just went through it. It wasn't, even in our house, birthdays weren't really celebrated. It's only once I got to university, other people made more of a thing with regards to birthdays, especially when you hit like 21 and stuff. I suppose the hardest bit for me just at that time was just trying to rationalize and comprehend what happened. And I did question, this is where faith comes into it, because there were times where I was finding it difficult in my own head to understand. My sister had not done anything wrong. Yeah,
and you're only 15. These are normal questions that anyone would have.
Yeah, and so it was that was quite a difficult in my own head. Not that I ever verbalized that when I look back at it. Not that I did anything stupid. I didn't go off the rails.
No, but you're just asking questions.
That was it. And it was always difficult, because I'm like, what did she do? And also when growing up, when you're learning in mosque, when you're learning the Quran, when you're learning the Islamic books, it was very much, it was at that time forced. And what I mean by forced, it was, if you don't do this, you're going to go to the hellfire. And it wasn't explained in a way that, look, actually, this is how you should live your life. This is the best example of how you should live your life. And by following this path, you are going to get a better outcome, but also you're going to be a better person for it.
Yeah, things have changed a lot, thankfully.
Sure.
I remember growing up, going to the masjid. I really hated going. I'll be honest. You know, we used to get hit. That was just the way it was then.
Of course.
My kids now, alhamdulillah, they love going to the mosque.
Sure.
Like when they do iftars and they have events on, even just generally, like when I'm going, can we go with you? Because things have changed. It's a lot more of
Mashallah,
a
that's
positive environment, especially the mosque I go to, Cheadle Masjid, and it's a very inclusive, very proactive mosque. I think that does make a difference. But you're right, at that younger age, it's just this is how it is and don't question it. But, you know, when you read the Quran, throughout the Quran, Allah is saying to us constantly, ponder, think about what I'm saying, reflect on what I'm saying. And I think it's just human nature, isn't it, to ask questions and to, especially when things happen, you have to have a reference point.
Well, of course, because not only are you asking yourself, but then when somebody else who may not be Muslim asks you a question, there's going to be doubt in your mind, especially if you haven't got the answer yourself.
Yeah. Why do you pray? Oh, because we have to.
Yeah.
That's not an answer.
No, and that's it. And so, you know, similarly in my own head, at that time, I was like, why did this happen? Because she's not done anything wrong. So that was very, very difficult. But then, alhamdulillah, now I realize, and the journey that I've been on and what I've been able to do, and also, inshallah, what I've been able to do for other people.
Yeah, of course. And inshallah, she's waiting for you for that day, inshallah. Yeah, because it's obviously still quite an emotional subject, because it's not something small, is it? So look, you went through this difficulty as a youngster, these challenges. That kind of led your desire to helping others. I can see now why you've had the career that you've had, especially with volunteering, especially with having that desire to fix things. Maybe you couldn't fix, unfortunately, what happened to your sister, but you've had the tools and the expertise to help other people. And so you studied medicine, sports science?
No. So
okay.
medicine was what I trained. So I trained
so was that
at London.
Yeah, so from someone ignorant on this subject, so medicine, as in that was just the name of the degree, was medicine.
So it's medical degree.
Degree, yeah. And you studied medicine. When you finished university, you decided you wanted to go into sports. Again, this is going to sound quite ignorant, but sports science was the area you wanted to work in?
No, I actually wanted to. So when I got into medical school, I'd rather, at that time I thought, okay, I wanted to initially go into neurosurgery to try and help people similar to my sister.
Yeah.
Then once I started doing rotations, attachments, I just felt it was a bit too close to home.
Okay.
And I almost felt that with every patient, I was going to be too emotionally involved. So then once I finished medical school, I'd hit my head, because going back to engineering and the fact that I like fixing things, I had in my head I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon.
Okay.
So orthopedics is where somebody involves surgery regarding bones and joints, and managing those, and it's usually through surgery. So that's what appealed to me, because people can be disabled quite quickly if they get an injury and they then require surgery, and then you're able to fix them, and hopefully they can get back to what they enjoy doing. But the reason I then went into sports medicine was that I used to play lots of football, and then when I actually played during a game, I actually got an ACL injury. So
the ACL came at this point now.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's while I was a doctor, and I'd still be playing football.
So you were a doctor.
Yeah.
You suffered an ACL.
Yeah.
You loved engineering when you were younger.
Yeah.
So now you're probably thinking, I need to fix this if someone else can't fix it, I'm guessing.
In a way, yes. And I suppose what really drew me down specializing was the fact that I was told it was going to take, even though I was a doctor, it was going to take me 18 months in the NHS to get an MRI scan. Oh, right. Okay. Which is about the same as it is now today, I think.
but
my point was that I was then, because I loved my football, that was my release. I was gaining weight.
Okay.
I was really getting unhappy. And so then I just took the decision that actually I want to specialize in sports medicine. And the main reason for that was to then try and help not only myself, but people like me as well. Because all my friends were playing football, we were playing in Sunday leagues. And so I wanted to try and help other people who didn't have private healthcare. And at that time, sports medicine wasn't a recognized specialty in this country. So I did a master's in sports medicine at Queen Mary's.
But just to interrupt you there, sorry. So that's interesting, because from reading through your background, you were kind of jumping ahead of time a little bit because, like you said, sports medicine wasn't really established that well.
Yeah.
You still went ahead and did a master's degree
That's
in
right.
that subject. Did you do it with a feeling that it would become something big, or was it more driven by just an area of passion for yourself?
It purely because of what happened to me.
Okay.
And again, it goes back to where I'm thinking, this has happened to me, then there's going to be other people that are in similar situations. And I then wanted to use it to try and set up clinics in the NHS so that I can help other people like my friends.
And they don't have to wait 18 months
Exactly.
to get seen. So a question that's come to mind, that going off topic a little bit. So crazy about football, grew up in Rochdale. I don't know if I really want to ask you this question, but I'm going to ask anyway. I think you probably know what I'm going to ask you. So what football team did you support growing up?
So growing up, we either supported Liverpool or Manchester United. And that was it. So
which one?
So it was actually Liverpool.
Oh, no, I thought you... Because you said later on in your biography that it was a dream. You couldn't turn down the opportunity to work at Liverpool. That was because you're a Liverpool fan growing up.
That wasn't the reason, but we'll come on to that. Why Liverpool? But I'd actually got, I think it was 1986. Our neighbours used to make pillows or cushions, and they'd given me a cushion, and it had I think it was 1986 FA Cup. Liverpool had won it.
Okay.
And that was a reason, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of my friends, as I say, it was 50-50 Liverpool or Manchester United.
All right, so before we go back in time, so you said, so do you still support Liverpool, or because you've had you've been working with different football clubs, have you become a little bit agnostic now as to?
No, completely. I'm not, I've still got friends there.
Okay.
And even among, Sir Kenny Dalglish, I still drop him a text now and again, and like on his birthday, and just wish him well.
So Liverpool are still your team?
No, I to be honest, it just becomes a job. I know that sounds terribly cliched, but it is. It's whichever club I've worked at the end of the day, they paying the bills. So I want them to win.
Probably haven't had time to really properly support a football team outside of your work anyway, because you're so busy.
When I go back to it, the last time I actually watched a proper game as a fan, and it was with my friends, was the Champions League in 2005, and that was I remember it clearly. I was at my friend's house, and that was the last time I can remember me being with my friends supporting Liverpool, because after that's when I started working in football teams. So I didn't really then start watching games with my mates. Because most of my time I'm there with the teams, and then when I'm home, I'm not even thinking about it.
Probably don't want to think about football. Right, so going back, you decided to study a master's degrees in sports science.
Sports medicine.
Sports medicine, sorry.
Yeah.
You graduated, and then from what I read, there weren't like a load of positions available within that industry, because again, it was quite new and upcoming.
Sure.
So you did something which I think is a very good learning point for everybody, especially youth now, because instead of just sitting at home playing on the computer or bumming around, you decided to do voluntary work because you had time and you wanted to continue to learn, perhaps learn on a job, even if it was unpaid. Is that what happened next?
That's right. I mean, it's probably the best thing, and I still even now try and do as much voluntary work as I can, and there's two reasons. One, not only to learn new skills and to gain experience, but then also voluntary work in terms from a charity aspect, and they went hand in hand, because I also believe that doing good for others, somehow that good will come back onto you.
And I think, I said I wanted to go earlier on, I'd come to this point, was because your dad maybe instilled that into you by making you go and wash people's windows and do stuff, because even though you were forced, it was still like a voluntary act, and maybe at the time you didn't like doing it, or you wanted to do other things, but maybe that kind of gave you that appreciation of helping people. I'm sure when you were doing it as a kid, you saw people were grateful that you were cleaning their windows when they didn't ask for it. I don't know, I am assuming right now.
No, I'd agree that, like, I'm one of these people, I do internally, when somebody does genuinely say thank you, I buzz off that. and knowing that I've been able to make a difference and help somebody in their life, I suppose that's what, especially with regards to voluntary and charity work, that's probably the little thing inside me that gives me that little buzz, but also that drive as well. So in terms of sports medicine, I'd started setting up NHS sports medicine clinics.
So this is while you're still volunteering, or before?
Yeah, and at the same time. And at the same time as well, because I also wanted to, there was part of me that actually wanted to work alongside clubs, but I never had a dream or any aspirations of one day I'm going to be working at a football club.
But it shows as well that you were willing to take a risk, because again, you studied an area that was up and coming but not fully established, yet you were still willing to set up clinics and start exploring that area in a field that again wasn't fully established. And obviously we can see today that it ended up being a brilliant decision. So you started doing that. Is that how you ended up coming towards Leyton Orient? Because I believe that was your first break into football.
That's right. So I started, there was an opportunity to work with the FA. They needed doctors for some of their youth teams. So their under 15 women's youth teams, and a lot of their players that I worked with there are currently in the senior women's setup now. So they needed doctors for that, and that was just to attend their training camps. So I used to do that. Again, it wasn't massive pay, but it was an opportunity to gain some experience in that area. I got an opportunity to shadow a doctor at Leyton Orient, which was a League 2 club at the time. And then I used to take it upon myself to go in during the week as well, where I'd have a morning off and just go in and try and learn what is happening in terms of with regards to the players.
And again, this is still a learning curve, not just for everybody. You know, if you want to get into an industry, just go in there and volunteer, offer your services, learn, shadow people. You know, all of these things are great initiatives.
And it's really important. And so I get asked on a weekly basis, can I come and shadow you at your club? And I'm like, well, it's a little bit difficult. I can't really say to the manager, listen, so-and-so has just contacted me, can they come and sit with us on the bench? And that's not what it's about. And I try and suggest to people that, look, you should go and do some voluntary work, but you've got to start somewhere and start at lower league clubs. They don't have much in terms of many hands to help them and stuff. So even if it's something like helping with the drinks, you know, recovery drinks, anything that you can do,
it gets you in the door, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And what people want to see is that this is somebody who wants to learn and has got the right work ethic. I remember at Leyton Orient when, because I was doing the England youth teams at the time, when I was working at Leyton Orient, I noticed that none of the players at the end of the game would have any recovery drinks. And that's really important. You look at, you know, it's really important once you finished a game or a session, the first 30 minutes are really important in terms of getting the right nutrition in.
So just to jump in quickly, so were they not doing it because that point of the first 30 minutes hadn't been established fully in sport?
No, I think it's also just because they didn't have enough hands. Because they didn't have a nutritionist. They had fantastic physio there, and he's doing everything.
Okay.
So, you know, they would just have one physio practically, and the physio would be expected to do everything. And he just hasn't got the capacity to consider in terms of from a nutrition element. And now even the teams at that level, they will have nutrition advice. They will have more than one physio, so they'll have a much bigger support team. But what I did was I saw what was that they didn't have that, and I would, before the game, I would go to the nearest supermarket, buy a cereal bar and like a protein drink or a milk drink, and I would then get £1 off each of the players at the end, and then hand them a drink and a cereal bar, just so that they could replace the glycogen which they've just used up in the game.
So is it about glycogen, replenishing the glycogen, or is it about muscle repair?
Because combination.
Because this theory has been going around for a long time. It's clearly not theory; it's fact. Because you read a lot of stuff and you hear a lot of things about, oh no, as soon as you've exercised, the first thing you're going to do is drink a protein shake or whatever. But it's actually true that it's really beneficial to do that.
It's a combination of two things.
Okay.
So the protein is there. Protein's really to help with regards to muscle repair.
Yeah.
So when you've, whatever exercise that you've done, the whole purpose is that the muscles now need to adapt and build. And the best way of doing that is by taking protein on board. So that's what that, and the glycogen is there, is the quickest energy source for the muscles. And so to replace that, the quickest way of doing that is by having, something with glucose in.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. So you're at Leyton Orient, you're volunteering, you're doing some really good stuff, like you've just mentioned. What led to you getting your actually full paid position?
So I think the person, the doctor that was there, he was moving to England rugby, and so he just said to me, he said, look, this position has come up, and do you want to go for it? And when we say a full-time position, I was doing my clinics. I was also at that time, because sports medicine wasn't established, I was also training to be a GP. And the only reason I was doing that was that if sports medicine wasn't going to work out, then at least I've got that to fall back on.
And again, that is another good learning point, because you should always have a backup plan.
No, 100%. 100%. Yeah. So, and the reason I started going down that route, so my wife was a doctor as well, and when I was doing orthopedics, it was literally, and she was doing A&E at the time, it was literally like 2 shifts at night, because 1 week I'd be on call, another week she'd be doing nights, and you'd rarely see each other. So I took the decision, maybe I've also got to do something else. And so part of my mind was, okay, I can do the GP training, but something in my head just think, okay, maybe we can make something work with regards to sports medicine, but I had no idea what.
Yeah, because again, it was still quite new.
So I did the GP training, and got the qualification for a GP, and if I wanted to do GP and become a full-time GP, I could have done, but I only did that so that I could get the training, have a small amount of income. But my main thing was it allowed me to do the masters in sports medicine and do the clinics, and the voluntary work, which wasn't bringing a huge amount of income in, but maybe, just maybe, that could lead on to other things.
Yeah, so look, if I'm a young guy or girl who's just finished university, I'm at home, I'm trying to find a job, the job market is super competitive. I mean, every year we hear the same thing, there's less jobs, graduate jobs are like just rammed with applications. What is the best advice that I know this isn't an employment thing, but well, I don't even really need to ask you. The best advice really is to go out and get and volunteer. If there's something that you want to get into, there will always be someone in that field who needs someone to do something for them, whether it's, like you said, giving out drinks bottles or doing something. Just do anything.
No, 100%, because if you look at it, lots of people coming out with qualifications and very similar qualifications. But what really people also looking at is how you applying that in the real world. Is one thing having a piece of paper which says you've got a qualification, but how you actually applying that. What are you as a person? How do you work within a team? What's your work ethic like? And those things don't necessarily always come out in an interview. So for me, volunteering is your interview. It's your way of showing that, look, this is what I'm about. And you just never know when opportunities may arise. So why not give yourself a better opportunity to demonstrate what skills you have, and that if somebody who is possibly looking for someone to be employed and they see something in you, then that could be the opportunity. Whereas they're not just going to come knocking on your door and say, we've found this role. So you've got to present yourself as widely as possible so that people either know of you or you're right in front of them so they can actually see what you can do.
So the Leyton Orient position, did that position itself become a job that actually paid you enough and that you could live off?
No. So that was I was only paid to cover the games.
Okay.
And then if there was, say, maybe a medical needed doing, I'd be called in to do a medical. But the rest of the time, it was a physio that was full-time paid. And so they would be just call on me in an emergency. But otherwise, I was still doing my clinics and stuff, and I was literally just there on match days.
So this was your first foray into football, where you wanted to go, or well, that was the plan at the time. What was it like being a Muslim at that time, going into sports? Because things have changed a lot. That time, it would have been very different to today. Was there any issues? Was it challenging being a person of color, also a Muslim, breaking into an area again which was still relatively unknown as in sports medicine? What was it like for you?
It's interesting because, like, up to that point, I'd never been to a football game. And the main reason for that, so growing up in Rochdale, you actually avoided when there were games at the stadium in Rochdale because, and I don't know how true it was, but they almost, we were warned by our parents that the fans, there's certain groups of people that will be attending those games. They're going to be looking for trouble, and if they see somebody not of the same colour, then you may get attacked, targeted. So you stayed well away. So there was no way that I would ever consider attending a football game. Now, Leyton Orient, it's an amazing place in the sense you've got this stadium right in the middle of the community, and right in the middle of Leyton, where you look around and there's lots of South Asian Muslim shops all around it, but within the stadium it didn't represent the demographic of around the stadium, but there was never really a moment, certainly within any of the games at Leyton Orient, that I actually felt out of place or ever any issues.
It's funny because we've had this conversation quite often. I mean, look, going back to growing up in Rochdale, my dad grew up in Huddersfield, and when we were young, or when I was young, and we used to go for a walk, my dad would always say to me, it sounds crazy, but my dad would always say to me, son, when you're walking, walk with your fists clenched. And the reason why was not because we were looking for a fight, but because you have to be ready. Because my dad would tell me stories about how at that time in Huddersfield, there would be certain people going around looking for trouble. And then going back to today, so when I go to United to watch games, I feel like when you're in the stadium and things are going well and everyone's the same. It's when things sometimes go wrong, or when people have drunk too much or whatever, that's where things can something might not happen, but you feel a bit uncomfortable. And maybe that's why your parents said the same thing to you, because of, again, things have changed a lot, but, they're...
Look, I'd agree. Look, I grew up at the time where you'd have the National Front and the British National Party who would march through the town. So at the weekend, it was made clear you can't go into town because there's going to be marches. My dad was a bus driver. Quite often I'd come back from school and my dad would be laid on the sofa because he's been beaten up.
Oh, wow.
Just because, and no doubt it's because of his colour. And that would make me angry. But then he just turned around and I remember one time when he'd come back and he'd been beaten up really badly, and I don't know why. I just picked up a bat and I said, right, I'm going and finding him. And you could just shut up and sit down. What do you mean? Who are you going to go and find? And he just said, look, don't do anything which is going to cause problems for you. First and foremost, get your education, put yourself in a position of respect and trust. And his thing was always change people's opinion of you, change people's hearts and minds. And so I think that's the way that you've got to try and do it. I remember a talk, by Ahmadi that I was very lucky to attend once. And it was just the way that, he must have been nearly 65, 70. And he was an incredible speaker and also an entertainer at the same time.
You could see the way he talks.
Oh my gosh.
The opposition just couldn't say anything bad because he's just so lovable, so likable.
And that was the point. He just won your heart and your mind, just the way that he spoke. And he just said it. He said it's like, you're not going to, if you're looking at changing somebody's mind, you're not going to do it with a fist. And it's right. because all that's going to do is breed resentment in that other person, or they're going to think about revenge. And if they're doing it out of fear, it's going to make them question. At some point, when that fist is removed, they then going to think, actually, that wasn't the right way. So you've got to make somebody think that actually what you're saying or what you're doing is better than what they're currently doing at this moment in time, or it's something that is attractive to them, which would serve purpose for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for me, Ahmed Didat was probably, I would credit him with bringing me into, obviously you're born Muslim, but you're doing what you're told to do.
Yeah.
But when I was curious and I started looking for content, I consumed a lot of his videos, and I just, his mannerisms didn't just change other people, they changed for me because I just warmed to how he represented the religion. Sorry, I keep taking us off track, but you're at Leyton Orient, things are going well. At that point, was it when you went to Pakistan when the earthquake happened? So you're already not earning a huge amount of money, your career is still progressing.
I wasn't earning a huge amount of money. I can assure you that.
But
at
then
Leyton Orient and GP, it wasn't a huge amount of money.
Yeah, but you still again took that choice to go to Pakistan voluntarily, which is not something that's free, but you did it because you wanted to help. What was it like being in Pakistan during that earthquake?
Gosh. So what happened at that time, and I remember it was October 2008. I'd only just started Leyton Orient, and 2005, sorry, not 2008, 2005. I'd only just started, and I was actually doing an England camp at the same time, and my friend Professor Hassan Tahir, who was a rheumatologist, rang me. He says, "Have you seen on the news?" I go, "What?" He says, "Oh, this earthquake's happened, and over 4 million people have been affected, and at that time several 100,000 people possibly have died and stuff." And he said we should go and help. And I was born there, but I'd never been back. So I'd lived in Rochdale all my life, and I didn't have a real desire. But then I think I was in the hotel, and I just switched on the TV, and again I was seeing these kids, and then again something just struck, and I'm saying, look, alhamdulillah, I've been very blessed. I've been able to come here, and look at me, I'm staying in a nice hotel. So I actually used the money from that camp that I got to fly with Hassan. We flew, and there was no plan. We literally just landed in Islamabad, and then from Islamabad drove up to Abbottabad.
Oh, hold on. So you weren't going as part of a...
No.
You just decided, we're going to go, then we're going to help. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Because it was completely chaotic anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't real. So there was several organizations which weren't Pakistani organizations at that time that were properly organized. So there were already disaster agencies and stuff. And one of my friends had said in Abbottabad, there's a particular doctor, Dr. Ayub, who at Abbottabad Medical College is actually coordinating things while there. So if you reach out to him, maybe he can help guide. So we just literally just went to his medical
Yeah, because I was going to
college.
say, you couldn't reach out to him if you don't have his number. You just went,
and
right,
that's it.
let's go straight
He literally
there.
just went.
So you
went
turned
there.
up at his college?
Yeah.
And
At
found
his college,
him?
met him at his college.
Was he like, what are you guys doing here?
No,
or?
I think my friend had emailed him or
Okay.
something like that. So there was some correspondence.
Yeah.
But it was literally like, yeah, come to my house. We met in the evening, and then he said, okay, well, we'll start work tomorrow morning. So we're like, okay, what's the work? We had no idea. But then the next morning when we actually went to Abbottabad Medical College, no, his name was Dr. Naman, and it was Ayub Medical College. That was it. And the whole field was just full of tents. So these were all people that had been affected by the earthquake, and so around the areas, and so had come down, and at the Abbottabad is where the medical college was, and so lots of the medical charities were going there. So literally we were just going from tent to tent, seeing what the problems were, and it was pretty grim, because you were seeing, in one tent, which still find quite difficult, there was like a 12-year-old girl with her 8-month-old baby brother, and it was just two of them in a tent.
On their own.
On their own. They'd lost their parents, their grandparents, and that really hit me because my daughter was quite young around that time, and all I could think, oh my gosh, this poor girl is just by herself. There was a lot of stuff which I wasn't happy with because it wasn't coordinated. There were doctors who were just going from 10 to 10 and just handing out medicines, and there's no coordination. So some kids were complaining of like stomach pains and stuff, and then when you look at what medicines they've been given like 3 or 4 different anti-inflammatories, which they shouldn't have been given because nobody was coordinating it.
And what if it was an internal injury?
Yeah, there was lots that we saw, and and there was a lot of sad things that I saw as well. I know there were people there that were just practicing, just using these people as guinea pigs. And what I mean by that, there were people that had, say, issues with their elbows and stuff, and they say, okay, well, we can fix this, we can just put a plaster cast on, and they would just put a plaster cast on them. And you'd then follow up and say, why is this plaster cast? Have they had an x-ray or anything like that? Nothing. And we went back again in 2007, and we'd hear and we'd actually see some shocking scenes where we'd go out into the mountains and we'd see people and they still got the plaster cast on 2 years later. Okay, wow. So one arm had grown normally, the other arm had just stayed and just shrunk. Wow. And because what happened is that these people have gone and done something, but they haven't then given the follow-up advice. And if it's got to be removed. If they're from like a remote place and they don't really understand, they just think, well, it just has to stay on. That's right. That's terrible. It honestly saw some really, and I wrote about it in the British Medical Journal, that look, it's very well saying that these people are coming here to help, but like we weren't vetted. So hold on, those people were from here. Who that did those things? No, there were people from Pakistan. I know they were from Pakistan, but because of the lack of structure and processes. But also, I know there were people there that weren't doctors, and they were pretending to be doctors, and I don't know why they would do that. It was pretty grim, and there should have been checks. Like me and Hassan went, but nobody really checked in terms of actually, are these guys proper doctors? What are they doing? There should have been checks and balances in place to make sure that first and foremost that these vulnerable people are not being harmed and that they're being protected. But that time, lots of aid was going there. I also saw aid being used for the wrong reasons. It's being used privately, not for the, not sadly for the people that had been affected. But there was no coordination. And so, as I said, myself and Hassan had written about it in the British Medical Journal because we felt that actually it's very well receiving all this aid, but it's got to be properly coordinated. I think people don't really, on the other side, from an Islamic perspective, you're going to be held accountable for what you've wasted and what you've done, and it's quite scary thinking about that. So you're in Pakistan. It must have been very, very tough, as you've described. You've come back to the UK once you've helped. You got an opportunity to work at Tottenham, I believe. That's right. And that would be your first break into, I know people are going to kill me for saying it, but let's say top-level football, because Tottenham are, a bigger club. Sure. How did that feel? So, again, to be honest, I'd been doing, and again, it's primarily voluntary, was with Tottenham, with the academy. Oh, so that was voluntary as well at Tottenham? Initially. Okay, fine. So at the same time, and it's all a bit of a blur. They invited you to apply, didn't they, for a position? That's right. Yeah, okay. So I was doing some sort of voluntary work with the youth teams, just attending some of the games, the academy games, the under-16s and under-18 games. And then while I was there was an opportunity, first of all in the academy, to work, and that again was part-time, but it was more involvement than the Leyton Orient, so it was coming in a couple of days a week. So I applied for that, went through the interview process, and they offered me that. I did that for 6 months, and then the first team position came up, and again they wanted me to do that, but I said, look, I want to apply for it, so you can see who the best candidate is, and alhamdulillah I then was offered the post. How many years was this after you started volunteering at Leyton Orient? So I would say 2 years. Okay, so it took you just over 2 years to get a proper paid position then?
Okay, so
Yeah.
you had to really dedicate.
No, and as I say, I even now I still do voluntary work where I can, and to gain experience. It's not a case of it's more from a learning perspective. But yeah, for that, as I say, it was 2 years, and so I was doing the part-time academy job, and then I was still doing GP training at that time as well.
Yeah, at Tottenham.
So I was doing the part-time job at Tottenham,
Yeah.
the academy, and then I was doing some GP training as well.
Until you applied for that.
So until the first team role came up. But even that first team role was, at that time, it was, because it was a first team doctor role, it wasn't the head of the department. So I wasn't there every day. So I would go in 3 times during the week, alternate days, and then I would go in for match days, and then I would travel with the team and do the games. So I then, at that point, my wife then said, look, she's got to stop her work because the football work, it was just becoming so unpredictable.
Yeah.
So when it was my turn to pick up the kids from school and she's doing a GP work, I'm getting called in at the football club. And so it was difficult. I'm like, look, I can't pick the kids up. And she's like, well, I can't. I've got my GP clinic. So alhamdulillah, she then decided that she would take a break from that. And so she stopped her.
So credit to your missus, because for her doing that, she sacrificed her work for you.
100%. Because she also realised that, look, there's got to be some sort of stability somewhere.
Yeah.
And
what was it like sitting on the bench for Spurs, finally getting to that point where, I mean, you must have, I mean, I wouldn't say proud because you don't seem like that kind of person, but you must have felt happy that all that hard work, the volunteering had led to that point.
It doesn't register. I'm being honest. It doesn't register because you're just in a zone. I don't really get to enjoy games, even now.
Is it because you're just watching the players? Yeah,
you just focus. That's it.
Are you literally looking at the players, or you look?
Well, that's it. Oh yeah. You look.
And if you see someone suddenly hobbling or this and that,
that's it. So you're following that player now. Over the last few years, you've got your own tablet, so you're replaying and watching what's going on and what happened with the player and at what point did they start changing their gait. Was there a contact?
Their gait, as in the way they're
moving.
Yeah,
the way they're moving. So whether
so you're doing that live during a game?
Yeah,
because we've seen them on TV. That there's tablets there, but that's That's
of course.
Next.
So
level.
what'll happen is that we'll have myself, the physio will also be on there, and we'll also have several other staff. We're all connected by a radio. So if one of them suddenly notices a particular player, they'll say, "Oh, just check on so and so player." For the last couple of minutes, he's rubbed his right calf, or he's been stretching his hamstring. So what you do is you quickly go back through the video and see if there's a mechanism, if there was a kick, if there was an impact, or whether it was after a sprint. Because if it's an impact, then you're like, okay, that you can relax a little bit more and say, well, actually, you should be able to walk this off. It's an impact injury, and we'll just monitor him. If it's after a sprint or a jump, and there's not a direct impact, then that's one where you have to be a little bit more careful and think, okay, he may have a strain here.
This is changing things for me now, because the next time I'm at a game or watching on TV and I see the doctors, it's not, for those listening as well, it's not that a player's injured and the doctor just runs on at that point. You're constantly working throughout that 90 minutes.
Oh, no, 100%.
Spotting everything, because that you have to be that alert.
Well, you're looking at the mechanism.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. So,
and like an engineering perspective there, then, isn't it?
No, of course, because it's the mechanism is everything. Because so a player may be hobbling either because they've had an impact injury. So if somebody's whacked the knee or hit the knee or the calf, that's still going to hurt. So that's going to affect the way they're walking or running. But that's very different to where they've been sprinting and suddenly pull up.
We do hear that on TV, like, there was no contact.
That's
and
right.
That's something worse or more serious.
Or that's one that you've got to take a little bit more, because you think, okay, what's the reason for that? What's caused that? So there, obviously, the tissue has failed. And, then it's a question of, can it wait till half time, or do they need an assessment on the pitch? And that's where you hope the player will go down. And then you assess them on the pitch, and then you have to make a decision as to whether they're going to be able to continue, or from the testing, it's obvious that they've strained a particular muscle whereby if they try and push through that, it's going to be a problem.
And I think that's another thing. So that's why you mentioned before that it's quite high pressure and high and intense, because if you make the decision to take a player off and that affects the game, that falls on you, and it needs to be the right decision. At the same time, you don't want to take risks either. So finding that balance must be really difficult.
Oh, it is. I mean, some of those decisions, especially like at half time, where a player has come in and they've either had an impact injury or they may have a small strain, you have to make a decision as to whether they are going to be able to continue. No manager wants, the doctor knocking on their door at half time and saying, we've got a problem here.
One game really springs to mind, actually, and it's the Salah Champions League final against Real Madrid when he went off. So me watching it, I'm just seeing him holding his arm. And obviously he's hurt himself clearly, but it doesn't seem to me serious enough for him to not play. But clearly, that's, again, my ignorance, not being in that profession, that it's actually a lot. Sometimes for us, it might not look like a big deal, but it can really be a big deal, and it needs to be dealt with straight away.
Well, it's two things. I mean, I wasn't there at that time. All I can remember, he landed on his shoulder and impacted, and I think it was probably his joint, is what they call the AC joint, is where the collarbone joins the shoulder blade bone, the scapula at the front. And so it's likely that impacted that. And you might think, well, actually, that's the lower limb. But two things. One, it can be very, very sore. Not just at that point without even moving, but then he's got to move. He's got to push off people.
Yeah. And when you run, your arms move.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it then comes down to function. And if you can't function, you're not able to help and support the team. So that's where the difficult decisions come into play. So
then you ended up at Liverpool. So Tottenham was 2 years, was it?
So I was there 3 seasons in total.
3 seasons.
So actually, we were fortunate. My second game in the first team was actually the League Cup final against Chelsea, which we won, and so we qualified. We won the League Cup, and then in 2010 we actually beat Man City to qualify in 4th position for the Champions League. And so I was happy at Tottenham, but then it came to a point where I was on a 2-year fixed term contract after my first year, so I had a 2-year further contract, and so it was time to renegotiate. And so Spurs, always very difficult to negotiate with. They said
it wasn't Daniel Levy, was it?
And they said that, look, we're going to go away pre-season, and then when we come back, we'll pick this up. And I said, well, by that time, the new season will start. If there's any jobs anywhere else, then it's going to be difficult because they'll have already got people in place.
That's naughty. That's kind of forcing you into accepting their terms.
That's just the way that it was. So, and just at that time, Liverpool were looking at reshaping their department, and I was asked to apply. And the guy who was heading up the department was a Professor Peter Bruckner, who was one of the leading.
Who asked you to apply? Liverpool themselves?
No. So I think I'd heard from someone else who knew Peter Bruckner and said, look, it may be worth your while applying for that position. And at that time, I was organising something called the FA Medical Societies, which was 4 educational meetings a year for other doctors and physios to learn a little bit more about best practice in sports medicine. So the other reason I applied, and I'm going to be honest, was to try and get myself some leverage with Spurs to try and hopefully twist their arm to say, look, can we actually have a discussion here? I had no interest in moving to Liverpool, even though it was my wife and kids were not going to move there. So that was my only reason for doing it at that moment in time, because also I didn't know what Spurs were going to do.
Did you think you'd get the job?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't really.
So what I mean by that is you applied for it thinking I'm using it for leverage, but did you think, well, I might not get it anyway? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, maybe you were surprised when they were
No, sure. Probably a combination. I can't remember where I was like, it certainly wasn't, look, if you apply, this job is yours. It certainly wasn't anything like that. I just thought, okay. Anyway, I'd got shortlisted, had interviews, and they offered me the position, first team doc. I was like, okay, wow.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it literally was that. I still hadn't told the missus. So anyway, I went back to Spurs, and they said, look, that's fine. We're not going to match what they're doing, but we want you to stay, right? And that was enough for me. So I said, okay. I went back to Liverpool and I said, look, thank you very much, but I just don't think it's going to work for me.
But they didn't say they would give you more. They just said, we're not going to match it. So didn't you feel that was a bit, again, cheeky?
No, because I knew you've got to look at with regards to what was happening, probably my own naivety as well. But as long as they wanted me, I'm settled in North London.
Yeah,
I've got no.
But you're not, like you said before, you're not motivated purely. It wasn't by money's important, but it's not your biggest motivator.
If my wife and kids are not going to move, my wife's family support network is all around St Albans, and she's given up her work as well. I didn't feel that there was a burning desire that I've got to scratch the itch and go up there. But 2 days later, I get another phone call, and they've increased the money even more. I was like, oh, okay. And I thought about it, and then I thought, no, I still can't do it. And then again, a few days later, I just said, no, it doesn't work for me. A few days later, again, third call, and what they were offering was substantially more.
This is like a Premier League transfer saga. Like they put in a bid, turn down, put in a bid, turn down. But there's got to come to a point where money might not be your biggest motivator, but it'd be silly to say no.
That's what it came to. But I'm like, now I've got to tell the missus this as well. And I remember telling her, and obviously she didn't take to it too well, because she was like, well, why have you even applied there if you had no intention? And I said, well, look, you don't understand. I'd been backed into a corner. So I was, in my naive head was like, I'm applying for it, even though obviously Liverpool, huge club, working with Peter Bruckner, massive opportunity. I was like, but part of me deep down knew that my family wasn't going to move. So I'm like, okay, look, I can't turn this down now. In my own head, I'd convinced myself I can't turn it down. So she goes, like, well, okay, you go, but there's no guarantee that we're going to follow.
Okay.
So in my head, I'm like, okay, well, I'll try it for 6 months. I'm sure.
Not that your marriage was over, but just we're not moving.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, you go ahead and do it.
Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, okay, I'll go there, and inshallah, I was in my head, I'm like thinking, okay, if things settle down and stuff there, and that know that it's stable, that they'll be able, they'll follow. So the first 2 years were okay, but then also after the first year,
Roy Hodgson, wasn't it?
So when I joined, there was no manager.
Mm-hmm.
The new owners, I wasn't aware who the new owners were.
Was it the Gillette and
Hicks
and Gillette,
right? Yeah. So it was them at that time. But in my head also was like, I saw what was happening with City, and I thought, if ever there's a club that's got the opportunity for somebody really big to come in and go like what has happened with City, and I miss out on that, part of me is like, I'm going to be kicking myself. But I didn't know who the owners were, and that was until October that it got finalised with regards to the Fenway Group. And it's only once I joined after that, I then found out it was Roy Hodgson. And so the first 2 years were okay, where I was the first team doc.
Did your family move up?
No.
Okay.
No. So I had some time in terms of, I had more time, so Pete Bruckner would cover for me. So I'd have he was very kind and helpful. He would give me 2, sometimes 3 days, and I would be able to go back and see the family, and then back and forth that way. So that's sort of just about worked. But unfortunately, my son's got a heart issue, and so he had an incident, and this is after the first year, where he had a cardiac arrest. My wife, alhamdulillah, managed to resuscitate him.
Oh wow! You weren't.
No, I wasn't around. I was actually in Qatar at the time with the player.
Wow, that is.
So
how old was your son at the time?
So he was 18 months.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So I then flew back from Qatar, and thankfully, alhamdulillah, he was fine.
And just your wife being a doctor, big help, because a lot of people wouldn't know what to do.
No, sure. But I think, as she tells me, she just went into autopilot mode, because you have the defib. And that actually speaks to you and tells you what to do as well. So And then it happened again, and this is while we were in Europe. So we were out in Italy, and I remember getting the call from the missus. It was early in the morning, about 6 o'clock, and saying, unfortunately, Zaki's had another episode. I've had to use the defib. And that was particularly difficult because he hadn't woken up. And so I contacted the manager because we had the game in Italy later that day. And he said, look, you just got to do what you got to do.
Who was the manager?
Brendan Rodgers.
Okay.
So I then flew back. But that time, we didn't have any internet on the phone or in the air. And so that 3 hours of flight was probably the worst 3 hours of my life, because when I'd got on the plane, he hadn't woken up. And so I didn't know what I was coming back to.
Yeah.
And then when I landed, obviously turned the phone on, was praying the whole time that he'd now woken up. And it took another 45 minutes before I managed to get through to my wife, and she said, alhamdulillah, at least he's woken up and he looks like he's fine. So and then it was pretty clear that the family wasn't going to move.
And you've got a decision to make, and
Yeah,
there's only one thing you can
No,
really do.
and that's it. And certainly, to be honest, I still was continuing there. People might think, well, that's a bit strange. Why are you still continuing there? I still thought in my head, okay, they're going to move up. And then it was about another year later, once we'd got into the Champions League, that's when it just became very, very difficult, because the whole of December, I'll never forget, the whole of December, we were in the League Cup semi-finals, so 2 legs. We were FA Cup, which was in 6th or 7th of January. We were in the Champions League, so it was pretty full on. And I was like, I'm hardly getting to. Well, I didn't get to see them the whole of 36 days. And then we had a game against Wimbledon in the FA Cup, and I thought I'd be able to stay that night and stay in London and finally see the family. But then there was an issue with a player back up in Liverpool, so I had to go back. And then I get a phone call from the missus, like, where are you? I thought you were coming home. And I'm like, unfortunately, this has happened. And it was pretty obvious there's only one way it's going to go.
Yeah. And so, like, I know I've taken up a lot of your time. I've got a few more things I just wanted to cover off. So I wanted to read, if you don't mind, a quote that Steven Gerrard put in his autobiography. Now, I know that you're private, but this is a public quote, so you can't do me on this one. So I'm going to read it, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Okay.
Right. So he said in his autobiography, I'd probably have never played again or even trained in my mind as the operation began was this could be the end. I owe Dr Zaf and Chris Morgan, our physio, last year put my career into perspective. I mean, Steven Gerrard, I'm a United fan, but there's no doubt that he's, for Liverpool anyway, been one of their greatest players of the last 10, 20 years. Must mean, not from a pride perspective, because I know you're not like that, but it must mean a lot to get endorsement, because it's quite a selfless job. You're doing a lot of work. You're working a lot behind the scenes. You're helping players. But to get someone of his status to recognise and just thank you, you know, it must have felt... It must have been a proud moment without, in an arrogant way. It must have felt good.
I feel quite awkward. It doesn't really register.
Okay.
I'm going to be honest.
Because you just see it as your normal job.
Because look, I'm in a privileged position because I'm working with high-profile athletes, and they've got a voice, and lots of other people hear that. But you've got to look at, just in hospitals, some of the stuff. I'm working with primarily fit athletes, and you look at what the work that people are doing, really life-changing, like the doctors that helped my sister, you know, cardiac surgeons, medical doctors of all different specialities, nurses, you know, the work that they do, and they don't get anywhere near as much recognition. So it doesn't really register.
That's quite a good perspective, actually.
Yeah.
There are people all over the country doing things to keep the country going, and no one really...
Yeah, no, and that's it. I'm in a very privileged position.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy every aspect of it, being able to make a difference in people's lives, and that's why I got into it, is allowing them to be able to carry on and do what they enjoy. So that's the buzz that I get, seeing them back on the pitch and being able to perform. And so when they do say thanks, look,
it's not what you're looking. You're not going out of your way to look for that.
No,
if you get
but
it, you get it.
I suppose it's appreciation. So that's things that money can't buy, and it's the same things with over the years where I've helped people who don't necessarily have the means. So like a lot of the Pakistani cricketers. Yeah,
because that was one of the subjects I wanted to talk about. So you're not just football. You've done a lot of work with. You've helped over 50 Pakistani cricket players free with their rehabilitation or injury issues. I mean, that's quite that's very Dr Zaf, I'd say now, because I think you're just someone who's very giving and you're just happy to help people, and I think that's quite, not many people would do that, let's just be honest.
Look, I mean, cricket isn't my main sport. I used to play a little bit at university, and I'm not as passionate as many other Pakistani fans are. I suppose again I was in a privileged position. I got some of the cricket players reached out to me, and some of them have spoken about it openly.
So they reached out on their own accord?
Yeah, so initially through other people who knew I worked in football, and they reached out to me and said, look, can you help this guy?
Who was the most high-profile Pakistani cricket player that you worked with?
I mean, look, they've spoken about it and they know about it.
Was it
the
Shaheen?
Likes of Shaheen Afridi, Babar Azam, those guys know. So a lot of those that are within the first team, I've worked with, and just primarily they've. So if you look, there was a player called Harry Sahil.
Yeah,
who was probably one of the most gifted batsmen I'd ever seen, and apparently he had an issue which he hadn't played for 18 months, and he'd been told to give up your career. This is what he'd been told in Pakistan. So he then said, look, can I come over and see you? And I said, look, if you come to the training ground, we can see what we can do. And I spoke, the chairman was very good, Steve Parish, and he said, look, if you're doing it in your own time.
Yeah, so you were at Palace, you've left Liverpool, you've gone to Palace.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
And so he said that, look, you can, if you do it in your own time, that's entirely up to you. And alhamdulillah, that was nice because they could see that, look, I'm focused on my work with the team, and what I'm doing here is in my own time, and it's not really for my own benefit either. And so it was very kind of Steve Parish and Crystal Palace Football Club to allow the players to come in and use the facilities. And you look at Harry Sahil, poor guy had been told that he can't play cricket again. And for me, it was relatively straightforward problems. And for the physios. That's
crazy.
Oh, listen.
The fact that you said it's a straightforward problem.
No, there's so many there that are like that. So it's horrific.
My follow-up question was going to be, I mean, again, this is from my own ignorance, that I just assume they're cricket players, they get paid really good money.
Yeah.
Right? But that might not be true. I've heard differently actually from other people. Why did you need to do that? I'm not saying like why did you need to do it, but why was there a need for another doctor outside of cricket?
They haven't got the setup there.
Then or still?
No, even still. I mean, I've got a friend now who's gone over, and he's similar mindset to myself. He wants to give back and he wants to help. Who's a physio called Jav Mughal, and he's gone there. There's just so many politics, because even if you try and help, there's people who will try and block because they've got their own interests, and their interests aren't necessarily for the benefit of the players.
I've heard the same with football. I've heard there are people in positions that are only in those positions because their dad might be a minister or whatever, and they have literally no experience in that area.
And that happens in across sports, and it's sad, because the reason I always say there's two things that can connect people wherever I'm in the world. One is sports. So wherever I go in the world, and then when I travel with the teams, I can speak with people about sports. There's always somebody who likes football in some way or form. There's always somebody who likes cricket, and the other is food. So both are passions of mine, and that's irrespective of which race, religion, country. And we see that when any athlete, doesn't matter which sport, of a particular country, when they do well, the whole country gets behind it. So you look at when Pakistan won the Champions Trophy in 2017, the whole country, all the Pakistanis here went crazy just off the back of it. When Arshad Nadeem won the javelin gold medal, the whole country, everyone get behind it. But the support them guys get is pretty poor standard, very, very poor standard. Yeah. It's nowhere near the level it should be. And those guys are competing with other countries like India, Sri Lanka, UK, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, with one hand tied behind their back because they've got better setups and able to support their players better.
It's frustrating because, look, I'm British born, parents are Pakistani. I feel connected to both countries, right? And I want to naturally see Pakistan do well in everything. I've stopped really following them in cricket because I just got fed up. You don't know what you're going to get. And I just couldn't deal with the emotional side anymore. Like, you really get into it. It's just very hard sometimes. I'm kind of a bit negative towards it because I feel like I don't think things are going to change anytime soon because I feel those problems are so deeply rooted that you and I are going to struggle to make change. But then on the flip side, you could say, well, if we all think like that, nothing will ever change. It'll just be the same thing.
No, exactly that. And that's why I suppose, and again, I'd finish my work at, say, 5 o'clock. Harry Sohail would come in and I'd finish at 7, 8 o'clock. And it was all voluntary. It wasn't I didn't want it to be put out there and say, oh, look. And I certainly didn't want journalists following me and Pakistani journalists and stuff, because I know obviously it's a big thing there. My thing was I just want to help this guy get back to representing his country, but also him be able to help his family as well.
And you did that, right?
He got back, and what I say, me as a physio, is really
very,
very basic.
He did get back into it. So from being told he should retire, he actually went
after
on.
6 weeks.
So after 6 weeks.
After 6 weeks, this is a guy who was finding it difficult to walk up and downstairs, was now able to play cricket, and we had Beckenham, which was next to our training ground, so we'd go in the nets, and to finish that off, he would do, the batting, the bowling, the sprinting, and he was able to do all of that.
So Harris Sohail was told to give up cricket because his injuries weren't treatable.
Yeah.
Within 6 weeks of working with your team, so I'm not just with your team, he was able to go back to playing again and carry on in his career.
That's right.
Just shows what can happen if you speak to the right people, or if you have the care to educate people and give them the right direction.
But also, it's if people allow you to do the work, and that's the thing. So I'm as I said, I'm not a huge cricket fan, but people assume that there must be some secondary gain for this guy. I don't go to cricket games. I've been in my whole life. I think I've been to 4 or 5 cricket games in my whole life. So it's not something that I'm passionate about, or it's the fact that look at me, I'm hanging out with the cricketers. It's not my thing. It's for me. It's the fact that if I can help someone get back to doing what they do, and then being able to represent their country, and hopefully, if Pakistan do well, then everyone gains from
exactly. It makes people happy, makes him happy. Yep. And, a strong cricketing team and league in Pakistan would be good from an economic perspective, I'd imagine, as well.
Well, of course. It's, there's so many additional benefits. But first and foremost, it makes people happy. You see how, and in this time and with so many negative things going on, then sport, and if the team does well and people feel that they're being represented in a positive way, then that just makes people feel good.
It's a nice escape, isn't it? Football's the same for
exactly.
me. So was it while you were at Crystal Palace that you submitted some paperwork or a paper to the FA about the Ramadan fasting recommendations? Or was it before then?
So no, I'd been doing that throughout. So again, just because of the position that I've been in, even I did some of that in Liverpool as well. So it was just to highlight really that we had some Muslim players. So at Liverpool, we had Kolo Toure and Osama Saidi. And so what we would try and do, speak with the nutritionists and try and help them, and also speak with the manager that during, when it was Ramadan, that to help them with regards to fasting, making sure they got the right foods at the right times, and also to help them with training as well, so that if there was any modification that could be done for training to help accommodate them, then by having an open conversation, we were able to do that. So we used to do that at Liverpool, and then when we came to Crystal Palace, we did the same, and then I would start writing
Were articles. The clubs open to the conversations?
Yeah, they were, because look, I think certainly the managers that we had, both at Liverpool and at Crystal Palace, they were fantastic. They understood the importance of, I'd say all the managers were very open to that. Kenny Dalglish, Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool, and then when I was at Crystal Palace, you had Alan Pardew, Sam Allardyce, and Roy Hodgson, all of them knew that they had players who were fasting, and it never was an issue. And all they would say is, okay, they knew how important it was to the player. How can we help get the best for the player then? So whatever we're going to put in place, we've got to support the player.
So things have changed a good amount, because Nathan, who was on my first pod, he talked about how the perception was if you're fasting, you can't play because you can't do what you've been doing before. I guess that was a bit ahead of this period where now managers were a bit more open. And at the same time, you're an asset. You've got a player who you want to play and be at the top of his level. He's chosen to fast, which means you need to now find a way to get him to still continue at the top of his level.
And that's it. And I remember having this conversation with Sam Allardyce, and he said the reason he was so, and same with Alan Partey, is that they're so open-minded. He says, you've got people from around the world. You've got to understand that player, their different beliefs. And if you want to get them on side, you've got to look after them. And they felt that they in turn would get more from the player and they'd be respected more as a result.
It's common sense, isn't it? If you fight for your player and you help them with these things, surely they're going to feel like that they want to give back to you because you've understood something really, really important to them. So you were submitting papers as well to the FA about, did you start talking to them about the fasting breaks? Because that's where I was trying to...
No, so the fasting break came about, that was through the Premier League. So that happened during... so it was a game between Crystal Palace and Leicester, and so Ramadan had just started. I think it was either 2021 or 22.
Was this the first official pause in play?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I then I had a call with Brian English, who was the Leicester doctor at the time, and we were speaking about something else, about emergency procedures and that everything was going to be okay for the game. And he said, if you've got any problems, give me a shout. And then I just said, oh, by the way, I'm just speaking at the top of my head. I said, look, we've got a Muslim player. Would you have a problem if I asked the referee if we could just pause in the first half for literally 30 seconds? And he said, well, we've got a Muslim player. I think
I was going to say Leicester have Muslim players.
So they had Wesley Fofana at that time.
Yes, that's it, yeah.
So I then spoke with the Premier League, Dr. Mark Gillette, and he says, yeah, he doesn't see it being a problem. Because any breaks, official breaks, you've got to get approval, obviously.
Yeah, because I was going to say, so you spoke to the opposition manager, doctor,
yeah.
You spoke to the referee,
yeah.
But does the approval need to come from higher up still?
So first of all, the Premier League got to be aware of it.
Yep.
Then what I had to speak with Mike Riley, who was the head of the referees at that time. And he said that the referee for the game is Graham Scott, so please have a chat with him. And so normally before the game starts, you go and speak to the referees if there's any particular issues with any of your players or anything like that. So I went and saw him, and me and Brian had spoken with our respective managers as well, Roy Hodgson and Brendan Rodgers, and they said, yeah, no problem at all. And we spoke with Graham Scott and all his assistant referees were there, and they also said, yeah, not a problem. And so we told they said that, look, tell the fourth ref when it's the time for iftar, and he will then let me know on the radio, and then when there's an appropriate break, I will stop the play. So
I know you don't like to take credit for stuff, right? And that's fine, but there was many cogs in this that actually we should be thankful for that eventually allowed this to happen. So there's yourself obviously talking to the opposition doctor, who also said no problem, the managers saying no problem, the referees saying no problem. All of those people together combined, having the understanding and the willingness to adapt a little bit, led to that happening. And alhamdulillah, since then now we're seeing it as a regular occurrence. So we first actually communicated over X when, not last Ramadan, the Ramadan before, Mazraoui broke his fast at Old Trafford, and I think that was the first time at Old Trafford I think the fasting break had been introduced.
Okay.
He had been playing for 75 minutes actually, and he broke his fast, and we put a post out about it, and it went viral, and we got in touch. It's good to see, isn't it, that in sport there is that willingness to adapt, and we're not trying to take over. It's a very, very small break just to quickly take some fluids and to eat something, that they've been willing and have allowed it to happen.
Yeah, and look, I know we had this conversation before, why wasn't more made of this, but I purposely wanted to keep it low key because I wanted it to be introduced in such a way that people realise it's not actually affecting the game. It's not affecting.
You'd hardly notice it. 30 seconds is...
Nobody even knew about it.
Yeah.
It only there was only attention to it when Wesley Fofana tweeted about it at the end of the game, and then I had so many people saying, "Oh, you should have done this. You should have made it much bigger." And I'm sorry, but why? The main purpose regarding this was that the players were able to open their fast. We didn't. It's a football game at the end of the day. We wanted the game of football to continue, and the way that I was able to rationalise it was, well, we have a break when, as we are now in the World Cup, where it's hot weather and they will have a dedicated break. So if this can help some of the players, then why not? But to do it in a way where it wasn't going to affect the flow of the game and it wasn't going to draw unnecessary attention.
So I was at the game when Nasir Mazraoui broke his fast.
Yeah.
And in the crowd that I was in, people were booing, not because he was breaking his fast, but because they didn't know what was going on.
Sure.
Because the referee stopped the game, he walked off, and it didn't look like a normal break. They were confused.
Sure.
Some people were saying that, oh, he's breaking his fast, and then later on, after the game, there was a lot of questions flying around on X and Instagram. So I think it was inevitable at some point, maybe people would learn about what was going on. I think you're right, though. The way to first do it was to see, look, how will it affect the game? Can we introduce it in a way where it's so minimal? But then eventually it did end up becoming this thing.
Look, there's always going to be people who are going to find a reason, the excuse of, oh, they didn't know what was going on, but there could be other more sinister reasons as to why they were booing. I can't say that for certain.
There has been at other clubs. We know that from last season. Was it Leeds, I think?
Look, there's minority of fans, and it reflects society anyway. And you look at the way that society is at this moment in time. Yeah. It's not just certain clubs. Unfortunately, there are going to be a minority of fans. I'd say at every club who, unfortunately, are going to have a certain way of thinking about other people from other countries and other races.
So we spoke about what it was like growing up for yourself and also my parents. It does feel a little bit that we're kind of going full circle, sadly, with how things are going. We get a lot of hate. We get a lot of questions. We had Tommy Robinson share our stuff online. At first, I'll be honest, I do a lot of the social media stuff, and it used to really bother me. And I'd see people's comments, and it hurt, and I used to get emotionally involved. Now I just look at it as engagement in a selfish way, but also there are people that will say, and I said this to Nathan, why? So for example, with this, what's Mazraoui doing? Why have they stopped the game? Because they genuinely don't know. And there will be people that know, or they just don't care. They don't care what the reason is. And when you tell them the reason, they still don't care in a negative way. Sure. The people, if one person out of 10 asks a question because they don't know, it's worth engaging to help them understand in the right way.
Sure.
Not trying to preach, but just trying to they're genuinely asking. Some people will ask and they don't care what you say to them. They don't care, and that's fine. But it's still worth it, I think, for those odd people. Like you said, it's not about taking over. It's not about making it about us. It's about education and also.
I understand that. My whole point was that the reason I kept it low key is because also I know there are certain people that would hijack it both ways. Some people make it even bigger than it should be. Yeah,
we probably did. Look, I'll hold my hands up. We made a song and dance about Mazraoui breaking his fast because we were just so happy that
of course, sure.
it was allowed to happen, which does bring in negative attention.
It does. But then my also thing was that we should also be glad in a way that people are understanding and accepting and able and allowing this to happen as well. So that doesn't mean that we have to go the other way of where some people can then make it bigger than it should be. Because my main purpose is that the Muslim players that are playing in that particular game, can we help them? That's it. I haven't got any other additional agenda. And on the back of that, we received in some incredible comments, fantastic comments, from people from around the world that would say, what a fantastic initiative. This really shows what diversity and inclusion is all about. So it was just nice to see in a positive way. But that's it. Park the bus is done. don't need to make more of it. That was in my head, because then it just creates unnecessary, and also it could work the other way, because if a player is not performing, then you're creating unnecessary attention for that player, because then people say, oh, he's had a poor game, it's because he's been fasting as well. So I can also understand it why a player doesn't want too much attention.
And themselves. Like you said, they're not thinking about, I'm going to go off now and break my fast, this is going to get attention. They're thinking, I'm fasting, I need to break my fast.
That's it.
I do think now that it's not like a rare thing now.
Sure.
Now that it's happened, maybe going forward it's going to be less of a thing, because it's just going to be accepted. So there probably won't be such a big deal made of it. We do get like 3 common questions, especially around Mazraoui breaking his fast. So I was going to read them to you and see what you thought. So the first one was, why can't they wait until half time? And some people ask again because they just don't care, or some people genuinely don't understand why, if I'm fasting, why can't I wait till half time? What would you say to that?
Gosh, I'm probably not the best person to be able to answer that, because from an Islamic perspective, it's clear you've got to open it as soon as possible. Once
so that's the answer. Basically.
That's the answer that you'll be giving from an Islamic perspective. If you're talking about a physiological perspective, yes, potentially they could wait a little bit longer, but
it's the religious aspect, really. There is no other aspects. It's because we are told to break our fast at sunset and to hasten to break the fast.
That's right. But my point is also, but why wouldn't you open it as soon as you can? It's the same thing like in America. If you've not, the reason they're having those breaks is supposedly to help with regards to their performance and reduce injuries.
The amount of stuff we're seeing online about that. Even players, Van Dijk came out and said something about it, because it's just become an advertising opportunity.
And so that's okay. But this, when somebody's got a genuine reason, okay, maybe personal, and it's only 30 seconds, people will focus on that a bit more.
Right. Next question was, they're only skipping lunch, no big deal.
Listen, I don't know how they do it. I've got to be honest. To try and play a game at that intensity, it's a performance environment. The reason that everything is relatively micromanaged, so normally they're meant to take the food on 3.5 hours before kickoff, between 3 to 3.5 hours, so that it's readily digestible. They've got enough hydration, because we know if you lose fluid, it decreases your performance. So they've got to work even harder to try and create a similar sort of performance. So what they're doing is ridiculously hard.
Yeah, so we're talking about elite level sports. So to go generally without eating when their body's probably used to being taken in.
It's incredible. And but what the players say to me, so when I've spoken with Sonny Bill Williams, Moeen Ali, Azarelli about this thing, the thing that they feel is mentally and spiritually they feel stronger. And we know that sport is also, it's how you're feeling on that particular day. You can be the most skillful person, but if mentally you're not feeling quite right, then you're not going to be able to perform at the highest level. So for them, what is able to overcome the supposed physical disadvantages, mentally they feel even more stronger, and that makes them even more determined to perform.
That's interesting, because that will move on to my next point. So there's a saying during Ramadan, and we don't mean it in a condescending way, but there's a saying that's Ramadan Maz. Now, it's not just as Muslims that say it, even non-Muslims talk about it, that during Ramadan, especially not the last one, but the one before, his performance levels go off the chart. Now, he already performs at a high level.
Sure.
But there's a notice from people, it could be just us making, in our heads, but there is a notice that there is just this Ramadan Maz, and he just turns into a beast, and he's like, performance levels going off the chain. Now, is that fiction, or is there evidence behind that? And it could be that it's hard to measure, because it could be what you've just said. It's a spiritual.
Yeah, look, I think it comes down to motivation, because if I had my science hat on, everything that I'm teaching in terms of physiology, in terms of nutrition, in terms of performance, everything would tell you that fasting is not going to allow you to train and perform at the highest level consistently. We know that if you lose even 2% of your body weight in water, which you can easily do, so if you lose 3 to 5 liters in hot weather like this, easily do that in over an hour, then your performance levels can drop by 20%. but your performance levels can drop by 20%, even if you've got all those things aboard, if you haven't got the right motivation.
Yeah, of course.
So what it is that it probably makes them even more determined mentally to overcome that sense of fatigue, that sense of tiredness. And so that in itself, the mental part is also a huge skill of sports, which is key. But that, as you rightly say, is difficult to measure.
So the legend of Ramadan Mazraoui does exist. It's just a spiritual awakening.
Well, I go back to look at the FA Cup. You'll have teams who are in the Premier League and they'll come up against a team in the lower leagues, right?
It's about desire and fight, isn't it?
And that's what it comes down to. So you're not going to tell me that those other players are physically better or skillful, that they're better. It's just on the day, if a player doesn't quite fancy it, or collectively as a team they don't fancy it, the opposition want it more, and then strange things can happen with that, and that can overcome, in terms of performance, that can overcome the other team. It's same when we see players who don't quite want to play for a manager. The same players, they go and play for another manager, and suddenly the performance changes.
That's one of those things that everyone always notices. Like, so I play fantasy football, and when a manager gets sacked and a new one comes in, or even new manager hasn't come in, I'll go, you know what, I'm going to stick those players in, because all of a sudden they turn into their best versions of themselves. So I guess the last thing that I wanted to really ask you is, now that things have finished at Arsenal, what's next for Dr Zaf? What are you up to? Are you open to working at Man United? Because I can put in some phone calls for you. No, but what's the plan now?
No, my good friend Imtiaz is the head of sports medicine there, and so no, I look, this is the first break I've had in 21 years. Last year was very, very intense. It was a very difficult year, just in terms of the amount of games that we had. Every 3 days we played over 60 games, and it just got to a point, well, as I said, 21 years, 19 consecutive in the Premier League. I've missed so many birthdays, I've missed so many weddings, so many things that I've missed. And my kids, alhamdulillah, they're still at home, and I just want a little bit of a break.
I think your wife probably looking forward to spending some time with you,
or maybe not. But
you've got a lot of making up to do.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, but the other thing is, I mean, alhamdulillah, I've got quite a few options.
Okay.
But I'm just taking my time.
Okay, cool.
I'm in a very lucky, privileged position where I don't have to go straight into another role. And I'm going to take my time and look at a project that's right for me. I'm doing a bit of voluntary work behind the scenes, and again, I keep that on the quiet. There's a couple of people and some groups that I'm helping out, but then I'm just looking for the right, because my big thing is about going in somewhere to make a change. I like setting up departments, setting up processes, and that's what my aim is. The difficulty with football, it's fantastic, but it doesn't give you much time to do other things. Everyone else just looks at it from the outside and think, oh, it's fantastic, you're just sitting on the bench. And don't get me wrong, winning the Premier League was unreal, but it also comes at a cost in terms of the amount of effort that is actually put in. And so let's see. As I say, I can't talk too much just yet, because there's a few things that are ongoing, and inshallah, I'm sure you'll all hear very soon.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that we've only just met for the first time today. You've been kind enough to come and talk to me on the pod. Hopefully, next Ramadan, if you have any free time, it'd be great to have you on for a shorter pod, just to give some advice on the best way to approach Ramadan. That'd be really cool. But no, it's been a pleasure, and Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for coming on. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.